solving all those endless riddles in middle school? I remember sitting in front of a computer with a group of other students, looking at the screen, trying to figure out what that riddle was talking about. Was it describing a person, a place, or even an object? We had no clue, but we continued to sit there and guess over and over again until we finally figured out what the riddle was talking about. This is so much fun and a great brain teaser. So let's try a riddle together. When the next screen pops up, let's read the riddle and see if we can figure out what it's talking about. We'll take 2 minutes for this, and then we'll come back together and learn the answer. Now that we've started to think about what advocacy and being an advocate is, let's take a step back for a second. Let's think about what farming and being a farmer is. Take 2 minutes to define these 2 words for ourselves. me, a farmer is anyone that works in agriculture and produces a product such as livestock or crops, while farming is the action of creating and producing those commodities. Now let's take a step back towards advocacy and being an advocate. Let's think about our favorite color and why it's our favorite color. In just a moment, when the next slide pops up on the screen, we're going to pause this video and scroll down to the description and click the link that says the best color. Once you get to this link, you will see a bunch of sticky notes pop up on the screen. You're going to choose one of those sticky notes and you're going to express why your color is the best color. Once you've written your answer, you're going to look on the screen and compare and contrast your answer to those of your peers, thinking about who's right and who's wrong. Once we have did this, we will return back to the video. Let's take 3 minutes to write our answers and compare our answers to those of our peers before returning to the video. Now that we did a little bit of personal advocating, let's take a moment to answer a few questions. In just a moment, when the questions pop on the screen, we'll take our paper and writing utensil and do a little bit of self-reflection. We'll take 2 minutes to answer the questions when they pop up on the screen. Now that we've did a little bit of reflection on how we advocate for our favorite color, let's take a moment to think about who can be an advocate. If you're at home, take a moment to write down your answers on a sheet of paper. And if you're at school, take a moment to turn and discuss with a partner. We'll take 3 minutes to figure out these thoughts, writing them down if we are at home, and discussing with a partner if we are at school. advocate can be anyone that supports or promotes a cause or an idea. An advocate can be a teacher, an FFA member, a farmer, or any other person. It is simply someone that is supporting and promoting a cause. Now that we've thought a little bit about who can be an advocate, let's think about an advocate in our lives. When the next slide pops up on the screen, let's take a piece of paper and a writing utensil and write a little bit about who is an advocate in our lives. Let's take 2 minutes to write about that advocate. Now that we've identified an advocate in our lives, let's take a moment to reflect on their advocacy. When the next slide pops up on the screen, let's take a piece of paper and a writing utensil and answer a few short questions. Let's take 3 minutes to answer these questions when they pop up on the screen. back to the advocate in our lives, let's think of some different ways in which we can advocate. If we are at school, let's turn and discuss with a partner about ways we can advocate. And if we are at home, let's take a piece of paper and a writing utensil and write down a little bit about how we can advocate. Let's take 2 minutes to either turn and discuss or write about how we can advocate. Now that we've had a little bit of discussion on ways we can advocate, let's take a moment to narrow a few ideas down. In just a moment, an image will pop up on the screen in which there are 5 words hidden that we need to find. At this time, when the image pops up on the screen, let's take a piece of paper and a writing utensil and write down those 5 words as we find them. Let's take 2 minutes to find these words and write them down before we find out where all the words are hidden in the image. that we've found those 5 words, let's use those words to identify 5 ways in which we can advocate. When the next slide pops up on the screen, we will take the 5 words that we just found in the image and use them to complete the sentences on the screen. After we've completed these sentences, we will come back to learn the answers. Let's take 2 minutes to complete those sentences on the screen. Now that we've looked at just a few ways in which we can be advocates, let's think about a few questions. In just a moment, when the next slide pops up on the screen, we will answer the 2 questions in which appear on the screen. Let's take 2 minutes to grab a piece of paper and a writing utensil and answer these questions when the next slide pops up on the screen. Now that we know a few ways in which we can advocate, let's think about some topics that we want to advocate for. If we are at home, take a moment to grab our piece of paper and a writing utensil and write down a few topics which we would like to advocate for. And if we are at school, let's take a moment to get together in small groups and discuss different topics that we can advocate for. Let's take 2 minutes to either write down what we can advocate for or to discuss in small groups what we can advocate for. Now that we've thought of some topics which we would like to advocate for, let's think about how we can advocate. When the next slide pops up on the screen, let's take 2 minutes to think about how we can advocate for the issue which we are passionate about. Now that we've learned a little bit about advocating and thought about some causes we would like to advocate for, let's learn about how we can become effective advocates. In just a moment, a QR code will pop up on the screen which will direct us to a matching game to learn about the steps to effective advocacy. When the QR code pops up on the screen, let's take our devices and scan the QR code to the matching game. We will take 2 minutes to play the game before returning to the video. Now that we've learned a little bit about the steps to effective advocacy, let's put those steps into action. On the next slide, we'll find a QR code. This QR code will direct us to a Google form in which we can create an advocacy plan based on these steps. Whenever the next slide pops up, let's scan the QR code and take this quiz. Let's take 6 minutes to scan the QR code and take the quiz before returning to the video. Now that we've had a chance to create an advocacy plan, let's take a moment to reflect on that process and how it went. When the questions pop up on the screen, let's take a piece of paper and a writing utensil and answer those questions. Let's take 4 minutes to answer those questions. learned how to make an advocacy plan, let's make one for ourselves. Let's think about an issue which we would like to advocate for. Let's make a plan in which we can advocate for this issue or this conflict in a conversation. We will take 6 minutes to think about the issue we'd like to advocate for and to come up with a plan on how we can advocate for that issue within a conversation. have learned how to be effective advocates and we have started working on our own advocacy plan, let's put that plan into action. Later today or right now, let's have a conversation with an advisor, a parent, a teacher, or a friend and advocate for the issue or cause that we have in our advocacy plan. Let's take the initiative and be an advocate. Once we've had those advocacy conversations, we want to take a few minutes to reflect back on how those conversations went. If we just had those conversations, when the questions pop up on the next slide, we will take a piece of paper and a writing utensil and answer the questions. However, if we will have those conversations later on, we will take a piece of paper and a writing utensil and copy down the questions on the screen. We will take 2 minutes to either answer the questions or copy the questions down from the screen. Now that we've learned all about advocacy and being an advocate, let's do a little bit of review. Let's make a meme or draw a picture that sums up everything about advocacy and being an advocate. You can do this with pencil and paper, or you can use technology such as your phone or laptop. But let's make a picture or meme that encompasses being an advocate and advocating. We will take 5 minutes to complete this task, and once we are done, we can either share that on the linked bulletin board down in the description, or we can share it to our social media, tagging the account seen on the screen.